Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be doing another champion showcase for the most recent, not the ongoing, but the most recent fusion, Stokk the Broken. Now I must acknowledge my endgame bias here when I say that this is the first fusion that I've actually built and used on my account since Wixwell came out back in May. And so that goes to show you that the longer you play in Raid, the less likely any given champion is to be useful, immediately useful on your account. Of course, there are exceptions to that rule. Sometimes fusions are literally game-breaking, cough cough, Armands. But the point is, the expectation is that not every fusion is going to directly appeal to every single person, which is why I always advise you guys when it comes to fusions to think about what you need for your account and your situation when it comes to whether or not you should go for the champion. And of course, whether or not you have the resources, because if you don't have the resources, then you can't do it regardless. So, Stokk the Broken recently built. CVC is live at the time of this recording, so I finally got through and booked him up and built him out. So we'll talk about his build, my plan for his masteries because they are not yet completed, and of course showcase a couple of areas where he's going to be useful for my particular situation. But for starters, let's go through his kit and remind ourselves why I think this champion is so good. On the A1, attacks one enemy 2 times, has a 50% chance when booked of increasing the duration of all poisons and HP burns on the target by 1 turn. It is not an AoE attack, but nonetheless it is still strong against single target encounters to extend the duration of all poisons, which can perpetuate the amount of poisons you can deal over the course of a fight. On the A2, this is probably his bread and butter ability, but it is an AoE attack times 2. The first hit will instantly activate all poisons and HP burns on all enemies, which is kind of a misnomer. It doesn't really activate all of them. If you think of like a poison exploder like an Alanaril or a Zavia, or I think Karam does it single target, it's more like a Theodore where he activates 1 tick of all poisons and HP burns active on all enemies, and it also activates all continuous heals on all allies, which he does provide in his kit, but it will also work on any other heals that happen to be out there. The second hit has a 100% chance when booked of destroying each target's max HP by 3% for each poison and or HP burn activated on them by the skill, up to 60%. So that's a pretty substantial amount of destroyed max HP, which generally speaking you won't really reap the benefits of, but nonetheless there is a couple of areas where that might actually be very impactful. And then lastly, it does increase turn meter of all allies by 20%. And then lastly, on the A3, AoE attack here, 100% chance when booked to placing 2 poisons on all enemies. If the enemies happen to be under HP burn, again, he does not have that in his kit, but if someone else has put HP burn out there, he will instead place 3 poisons, which is pretty substantial, and then a weaken on top of that to boot. And then it also places 2 continuous heals on all allies for 2 turns. An interesting aspect to his kit is the passive here, where damage inflicted by poisons and burns will ignore block damage on unkillable. So if you're thinking like wave content against like man-eaters and Sir Nyx, it can just bypass their unkillable passives, but also in like the arena, for example, it can also bypass Marichka's passive and make certain teams work a little bit better against her. There's also an added bonus damage here to the passive where whenever allies attack an enemy with destroyed max HP, their damage is increased by 10%. And then the icing on the cake is the speed in all battles aura by 20%. So how is my Stokk built? He's in a similar build to like my Battle Khazar, my Theodore, because I did plan to use him or try him out at least in a hard mode dragon. So he's built with relatively high speed for PvE content and high resistance, as well as high accuracy to be able to land his poisons against the bosses. The easiest way to pull off such a build is with triple perception, so that is what he's in, focusing again on resistance as well as accuracy across the board. Total stats are as follows: 47,000 on the HP, just under 3k on the defense. And note that he's level 50. He's not fully leveled because I do plan to do the rest of it in Minotaur when I start working on his masteries whenever there is a break between the fusions. 241 on the speed, 456 on the resistance. That is our primary goal, just so he can resist anything that the waves and boss might put out there. And then 288 on the accuracy. This is a little bit lower than it should be. You want to be targeting around 350 for like hard mode dragon, for example. And so I do plan to get the Eagle Eye mastery, which will give us an extra 50. So in actuality, this is going to be like 330, and then Lore of Steel is going to give me a little bit of credit too, plus some glyphs should be able to get me all the way out to 350 accuracy. And since I already mentioned a couple of masteries, I might as well talk about my plan for the masteries. My plan is to end on Eagle Eye just to get the extra accuracy in order to pull off the relatively difficult build. I do have this type of build on like 3 to 4 other champions, so him being the latest one kind of put a strain on my gear. So we're compensating with the gear quality here with the mastery Eagle Eye. Of course, you probably want Sniper. That helps his A1 be more effective at extending the duration of buffs. It doesn't really matter for the other abilities. Master Hexer is always good. Extend the duration of all the poisons he might be placing out there. I mentioned Lower Steel, which will boost the accuracy from the perception sets, as well as a little bit of the speed. I'd probably also go for Cycle of Magic, just for the chance to reduce the skill cooldowns. It's 5%, but it happens more often than you might think. Then the Swarm Smiter for more accuracy. Probably Arcane Celerity because he places debuffs. Standard debuffer stuff here, focusing on the right hand side, Charge Focus, and of course the accuracy. The other tree that I would go is actually the defense tree. Note we are not going with War Master, and you most certainly can go with War Master if you're focusing more on just pure accuracy for whatever content you need, and you're not trying to do the high resist, high accuracy build. Then War Master is the way to go because he does attack on all of his abilities. But my plan is to come down here, get the resistance, probably get Rejuvenation, Blast Proof maybe, Resurgent, and then like Delay Death, and I'll probably stop after that. I don't really think I need any of the T5s from the defense tree. Let's go through the pieces of gear that he has equipped on, starting off with the banner. We do have this lovely refresh banner that hopefully we'll get to see in action today, but it has a 5% chance to reduce the cooldown, just kind of convenience. Relatively fast here with the maxed out double speed roll. On the amulet, we have a resistance and accuracy being the focus, survivability on the ring, defense ring with defense and HP. On the boots, we have speed with accuracy and resistance. On the chest, we have defense with speed and resistance. On the gloves, we have HP percentage with speed and resistance. You're seeing a pattern here. On the shield, speed resistance. On the helmet, speed resistance, and then on the weapon, speed resistance with some accuracy. So because we are getting the 120 accuracy from the perception set, that does allow me to focus on resistance more so in the substats, just because we're getting a decent amount of accuracy from the perception sets. So now let's dive into the couple of areas that I have to showcase him in today. Of course, Dragon is probably his main selling point that most people would think of automatically because he is a poisoner, poison activator, which is most powerful in the current meta for PvE against the Dragon. I basically just swapped him into my existing hard mode Dragon team, replacing the slot of Dark Kale because they do similar things. They both bring additional poison, specifically against the boss phase, but Stokk the Broken can activate it on an AoE instead of having the chance to activate the poisons on the A1 like Dark Kale. Now I'll go ahead and run this team in action so you guys can see him do his thing, but I will note that this is not a composition that I would recommend necessarily. This is again just a one-to-one swap, and it's not really a one-to-one swap in terms of the capabilities of the champions, because I kind of have like a little bit of overkill in terms of the amount of poisoners on this team, and so it's just not as quick as it probably could be if there was some other optimization between the champions. He kind of does a similar job to a Bad L in a team, and so he's a bit redundant by having Bad L on my team. But yeah, Teodor's in the team, Tomb Lord's in the team, Stokk's in the team. We have tons and tons and tons of poisoners. We have 4 poisoners here, and then Stultus is also in there, one for the CC, but also because he has the capability to reflect the poisons back on the boss. So effectively, against the boss, we have 5 poisoners, which is most certainly overkill. So you can see here through the waves in about a minute or so, and we are able to see a little bit of his activation along the way. And yeah, this should take around 2 minutes or so, which is slower than my normal team, which takes around 90 seconds, give or take. But yeah, I'm not going to go through like all the AI overrides. It is somewhat optimized for this particular composition, but again, this is a relatively inefficient composition, so there's no reason for you to copy this team as it is. It is most certainly overkill. But yeah, we can kind of see them in action. Teodor and Stokk are a pretty strong team as far as double poison activation. Note that Teodor, when he activates it, he does maintain the cooldown or maintain the duration of the poisons, whereas Stokk will just blow them up. And so you kind of have to account for that depending on your team composition. And you can see them kind of back to back, or almost back to back there in action. But you kind of have to decide how you want to pair Stokk with other champions who might have similar abilities, because he will deplete the poisons a lot sooner than other champions like Teodor, who might just kind of keep them perpetually going. So there you have it. Pretty straightforward team, just under 2 minutes. And he is most certainly a powerhouse for Dragon. He can definitely help a lot of people progress. He's usable in all levels up to hard 10 in terms of Dragon. And if you build him with higher resistance, you don't have to worry about him taking some of the poison from the Dragon itself, and he can still maintain his accuracy for landing his own poisons and keeping himself alive with the continuous heals. So you don't necessarily have to run him in a regen set like some other champions who might be kings of soloing dungeons. Another area where he can be strong is of course the Spider's Den, where he is effectively an HP burn AoE activator. So just like an Artak or a Teodor or a Sissia or any number of champions who can activate AoE HP burns, which is fairly meta in terms of the Spider's Den, he can drop right into a team that you already may have, or build up a team that you don't already have and be your AoE HP burn activator. So in my case, he did actually make it to my permanent team as a replacement for Artak. This is a pretty standard comp that you're going to see most people type of run when it comes to speed running Spider Hard Mode 10. We have irresistible HP burn AoE from Walking Tomb Drang. We have 2 HP burn activators, and then typically for Tomb Lord Kavlax here, all other people would run like a Newt or a Marius or Krizia or whoever has enemy max HP damage. But in my case, I don't like using those if I don't have to, and so we went with a poison composition. So it's still effectively enemy max HP with Kavlax in there with his A3s. We'll see a little bit, but we're kind of using the poisons there. And the reason that Stokk is better than Artak in this situation is that Artak is exclusively activating AoE HP burn, whereas Stokk, kind of like Theodore, who's also on the team here, activates HP burns as well as the poisons that we're going to be placing on the target. So let's go ahead and run this team. Blink and you'll miss it. It's a very, very quick run, but we have Tomb Lord going first, places the poisons, but more importantly, he makes sure that all of the rest of the spiderlings spawn. Doesn't really matter that the last 2 come down without poisons, but we have the irresistible HP burn, activate, and then the big slam from Kavlax to end it off. So 15 seconds, pretty fast run. And just in case you missed it, we can run it again really, really quickly. But yeah, speed farm team. This is some variation that you could use if you happen to have this combination of champions. But again, the Tomb Lord and Kavlax combo could be replaced by anyone who does a relatively high amount of enemy max HP damage. The main thing here being that we're activating a lot of HP burns, we're activating a lot of poisons, and we're just blowing up all the spiderlings as well as the main spider together. In terms of other areas where you can use Stokk the Broken, Ice Golem comes to mind specifically on normal mode because AoE poison is most certainly the meta there. He again can heal himself with the continuous heals, but you can also build him in a regen if you do want to solo just to try and keep him alive, because the Ice Golem of course does hit very hard. Notably, the destroying of max HP is strong against the Ice Golem minions, and so it makes them a lot easier to kill if they happen to come back to life. And technically speaking, he can also work on some hard mode Ice Golem teams, although obviously the boss is immune to poisons, but he's still susceptible of course to HP burn, and he is an HP burn activator, so you can still work him into some certain compositions, especially against hard mode stage 10 where there are Sir Nicks notably. And so if they try to put up the unkillable, doesn't matter, his passive will prevent or will allow poisons to ignore the unkillable effect, so he can be a fairly quick speed run type champion in that regard. When it comes to other areas, faction wars of course he's going to be super useful. He's tanky, he's a support, he has poisons, he has healing, so he can keep your team running and alive, and of course he could ignore any and all man-eaters and bushies and whatnot that might pop up from faction wars and enemy waves. In the arena, we did talk about the fact that he could be useful against like Marichka in terms of like meta teams. He can allow you to use like a Gizmak, for example. They're in the same faction, Ogre and Tribes, and he can still activate, or you can still burn through Stone Skin through a Marichka passive, which could be pretty useful in some niche situations. He's not that useful in clan bosses. Demon Lord, not really. Hydra, Poison's not really that meta. And Chimera, technically he could help you with some trials if you want to run him that way, but I just don't think that poison trial is worth the hassle necessarily. And then Doom Tower, he can definitely help out. Again, Doom Tower waves, he's just a tanky support. He can be your AoE poison, a little bit of damage for the waves. And he probably has some application in the Scarab King. I haven't tested him against that, but presumably he should be able to keep himself alive, assuming you have enough resistance and accuracy, kind of in a similar build to what I have. Again, the continuous heals are in his kit, so you don't have to worry about necessarily building him in regen, although 3% resist here and there might actually heal the Scarab King. But he should be able to destroy his max HP. I don't know if it's going to be enough to break through the shield, but nonetheless, kind of like a Euros the Soul Cage, as long as you're placing enough poisons, the Scarab King will just kind of poison tick himself to death. And lastly, of course, the Cursed Cities, where he could see some play. There are plenty of stages that are supports only, and it's harder to deal damage without some form of AoE poison or HP burn, and so he comes in bringing in the poisons and poison activation, as well as destroying max HP, which could be useful because typically you are also against support units who might be super tanky, and so they're just going to be easier to kill with the rest of your supports if their enemy max, or if their max HP is destroyed. All right, so that's going to do it for the showcase of Stokk the Broken. Let me know in the comment section down below if you did decide to pick him up by doing his fusion, and of course let me know where you plan to use him, or let me know if I inspired you to use him in a new area that you hadn't thought of before. Like I said, for myself, despite me being endgame, he did actually come into play to help my spider team be more consistent. The problem, I'll say, air quotes, relative to the Artak composition is that every once in a while 3% resists of course, happen. And so if Tomb Lord and Calvlex both had one of their 4 poisons resisted, there's a chance that Calvlex wouldn't deal enough damage to actually finish off the spider with his big AoE. And so the run would just take a little bit longer. It wouldn't fail or anything like that. And so for turn attack tournaments specifically, it was just kind of less points. And so adding him to the team made it significantly more reliable because we're activating the poisons and HP burns twice. So basically I have 2 Teodors on the composition. As you can see, it left the boss with a sliver of health, and then Calvlex brings in the smacks, which is most certainly enough to finish it off with even a couple of resists here and there on some of the poisons. As I mentioned when his fusion had started, I do think he's going to be very, very strong for a lot of people progressing in the game. He can easily fit into dragon teams, Ice Golem teams, spider teams, etc. And dare I say, I think he's one of the best fusions for the year of 2024. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel. And also, if you are enjoying the videos on the channel, then feel free to hit that subscribe button down below as well. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.